If you want to attract real estate investor clients, you need to be able to find good deals for them. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to analyze investment properties so that you can attract more investor clients and so that you can find great deals for yourself. Coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Freedom Agents. My name is Marc Brenner. I'm a team leader here in Atlanta, Georgia, and this channel is simply about helping you increase your sales. Today we're going to talk about how to analyze investment properties, both to attract new investor clients and so that when you're ready to invest, you know what to look for. Quickly before we get into that, if you're looking for coaching, if you're looking to partner with someone who can help you get set up for success, absolutely free without you having to join a team, then you should reach out to me. All my contact information is in the description below. You can book a call with me, book a Zoom call me on the phone directly, whatever you want to do, but I have viewers reaching out all the time and I absolutely love it. So make sure you reach out to me today. All right, so one of my most popular videos on my channel so far has been how to work with investor clients. Make sure you go check that out. It's almost 30 minutes long and there's a lot of good information in there. One of the things that I talk about, if you want to attract investor clients, you have to be able to speak their language. You have to know the terminology so that you can guide them to complete their goals. You also know how to recognize a good deal when you find one. The main difference between investor-friendly realtors and traditional retail realtors is that regular realtors don't really know what a good investment property looks like. They'll probably just tell you, yeah, that would make a good rental, or yeah, that would make a great flip, when it may or may not actually be true. So one of the value propositions for an investor-friendly agent is that they actually know what a good deal looks like and they can advise their clients on whether or not to put an offer in on that property. Now, one of the amazing things about working with investors is that it's reversed from the retail situation. When you work with retail buyers and sellers, you have to find people that want to work with you and then find them a property to buy or sell. When you work with investors, you reverse the equation. Investors will buy as many great deals as you can bring them. So if you develop this skill of finding a great investment property, you can sell as many good deals as you can find. But the reality is finding great investment properties can be really difficult. So this is a skill you'll need to practice and get better and better at. But once you do, not only will you sell more real estate, but when you're ready to invest yourself, you can be very confident knowing when you've found a good deal or one that you need to walk away from. Now, we are not going to be talking about how to find these deals. If you're wondering how to find great investment properties, again, I've made a video about that. Make sure you go check it out. We're going to be talking about how you analyze deals. You've come across an off-market property or something on the MLS that you think looks good. We're going to talk about how to analyze that property. And we're going to keep it very simple, okay? When you get into this world of investing in real estate and speaking with investors, it can get dense and complicated. We're going to keep it simple. We're not going to talk about cap rate, which is really more appropriate for commercial properties. We're not going to talk about individual rate of return, which is usually higher level investors going really deep into the long-term returns of a given deal. So we're going to keep it very simple. We're going to talk about finding a flip or finding a rental, which are the two most common scenarios, especially if you're starting off working with investors. Now, here is the great news. Real estate investing is not complicated. It can get complicated, specifically the financing, and when you go up in levels and you're talking about more money and more people involved, it can get complicated. But fundamentally, real estate investing, finding a flip or finding a rental is really very, very simple. In fact, there are only 4 numbers or variables that you need to be aware of and determine. And those are the purchase price, the rehab price, the rent price if you're going to rent it, and the sales price for whenever you decide to exit the property. And the even better news is that a few of these variables are extremely easy to determine. For instance, you're a realtor. If you have any experience, you know what a property is going to sell for, okay? We can cross that one off right now because essentially that's just running comps based on what the finishes of the property will be and where it is located and what the pros and cons of that area are. So you know how to run comps. So as a realtor, you're very well positioned to speak on what a property will sell for based on what an investor plans to do to that property. So that's one thing you can pretty much check off the box that you already know how to do. And the other one, what it will rent for, is extremely easy as well. Essentially, again, that's running comps, and we'll get a little deeper into that in a minute. So you know how to figure out what it's going to sell for. You know how to figure out what it's going to rent for. That's just running comps. And your purchase price is simply going to be the end of an equation, which is the sales price minus the rehab price will give you a good idea of what the purchase price is based on how much profit the investor is looking to get. So really, I mentioned 4 variables, and the only difficult one that you will need to develop the skill of over time is going to be the rehab costs, how much it will cost to get this property in condition to either rent it or to sell it. But let's just go a little deeper into each one of these variables real quick. So when you're running sales comps, you probably want to look at rental grade condition and retail condition, or like fully renovated condition, right? You want to speak with the investor and say, what's your long-term goal? If you're planning on renting this out for a period of time, and based on what is in that home at the current moment, you're going to want to comp it out with similar properties. Especially in this case, you'll be looking at the rental comps. You'll want to be looking at the conditions there. And obviously, you don't want to comp a property that has rental grade finishes against properties that are selling that are fully renovated. Okay, so we talked about sales comps. Let's talk about rental comps. Now, I run through rental comps all the time, and the way that I do it initially is just to use the tool called Rentometer. I think it's like 10 or 20 bucks a month. It is well worth it. I use it every single day. It gives pretty accurate and conservative rental comps for properties. That's what I start with. And then if the investor client is actually looking to put in an offer or get more serious with their underwriting, I will compare the Rentometer estimate with actual lease comps in the MLS. If you're a new agent, there's sales comps. There's also lease comps in the MLS. Okay, you might have to dig around for them, but they're there. Now, not all of the lease comps are going to be available because many properties are rented outside of the MLS. So you can do a little Google search, but it shouldn't be too hard to find rental comps for a similar property. Now, if you're really having trouble comping out a rental, one of the best things you can do is talk to a local property manager. They're going to have very accurate information about what properties in that area are going to rent for because they actively manage a portfolio in that area. So if it's a more complicated situation, like maybe a multi-unit property or maybe just a one-of-one, you do come across those sometimes, call a local property manager. That's a good relationship for you to develop anyway because they have connections with a lot of investors, and property managers are a great source of off-market properties. Okay, so now let's talk about rehab price. This is the barrier to entry that I always talk about. Working with investors is a wonderful opportunity, but you can't do it if you don't take it upon yourself to educate yourself and practice. And one of the things you're going to have to get good at is figuring out rehab costs, which can get really complicated, not only because there are 100 different facets to a home, but also because these prices fluctuate both for materials and labor depending on what the market is doing. But listen, don't overcomplicate it, okay? And don't be so literal. And these are issues that I struggle with that I'm encouraging you about, okay? Just plow forward and do your best and learn from your mistakes. Here's a really good resource for you. Jay Scott's The Book on Estimating Rehab Costs. This is a Bigger Pockets publication. This is probably the best resource for estimating rehab costs. Some of the information might be a little dated, but it's going to give you a perfect framework for understanding how to estimate rehab costs. So if you're serious about working with investors, go and order that book right now. Now, the second big thing you should probably do, which is not easy, I'm warning you now, but it's worth the effort, is making relationships with local general contractors. Now, if you're a realtor, even if you just focus on retail, that is still a good relationship for you to have because your clients are going to be constantly asking you for a reliable, honest general contractor. But if you develop a relationship with a general contractor and if you start to bring them business because you heard they could do good work and you just start to ask them questions, you want to be respectful of their time, that is a person who can really help you understand what something's going to cost. Now, the challenge always is when you come across a potential investment property, how can we get the GC there before we're under contract to take a look at it? In reality, in my experience, you probably can't. Any successful GC, you probably should not waste their time by looking at a property before you get it under contract. Now, if you're in escrow, you have it under contract with a couple days due diligence, that's a good time to get your GC in there and to get a real bid. But you want to respect their time and you don't want to give them the runaround for a property that you're not even able to get under contract. So make some calls, do some research, ask some colleagues who the good GCs are, screen them, look for reviews, talk to people who have worked for them, and develop a relationship with them. And, ask them questions over time. Maybe you ask them, hey, what's it going right now to replace a roof? What's the going rate on replacing floors right now or encapsulating a crawl space? You don't want to overwhelm them with a huge list of things you want them to reply to, but you want to develop a relationship, provide them value by recommending them to some of your clients, and eventually they'll be a great source of information for you. And ultimately, what you should probably do is create a spreadsheet. If you're really serious, not only about working with investors, but about being an investor yourself, I can't think of anything worth your time more than create an Excel spreadsheet with all of the facets of a home and break it down into material and labor. This will be a living document that you have to update as the price changes, but this is going to be a fantastic checklist that you can walk through a home and understand and underwrite what it's going to need to get it where it needs to be. And the book that I mentioned, the book on estimating rehab costs, gives you the exact framework for how to create a spreadsheet like that. And just for your back of napkin math, you probably want to ask your GCs what the price per square foot is currently in your market. This is rough estimate, but this is really when you're analyzing deals, to be able to analyze a lot of deals each day, you can't deep dive into everything you come across in the MLS. It'll just be a waste of time. So actually back of napkin math is really useful because what you do is you take a bunch of properties, you run them through Rentometer and you price them out per square foot if it's a total renovation, and this at least crosses a bunch off the list and it filters down properties that you can then focus on to really underwrite in detail. Okay, so you're looking for a flip for a client. You've looked at the ARV, the after repair value. You've subtracted the rehab costs that your GC helped you with. Now you have a new price, but you have to consider the margin that the client is looking for. Most investors that I work with, because flips can be risky, there needs to be at least $75,000 of profit in any given deal, and in a lot of times more than 6 figures. But let's just say your investor client looking for a flip wants to make $80K after expenses on a flip. That's what will make it worth their time. So you've got the after repair value, you subtract the rehab costs, you subtract $80,000, which is their desired profit. You also subtract any expenses associated with the deal, like your realtor fees. If they're going to pay you 6% to list it once they flip it, you want to factor that in as well. A quick caveat for you guys. When you look at investment properties, it's very tempting to fudge the numbers so you can close a deal. This is a terrible practice. In the long term, you want to be very detailed and very honest because that's how you're going to make your clients win and that's how you're going to find truly great deals for yourself. So don't get into the habit of fudging stuff to make something appear better than it is. So simple equation for a flip, you got your ARV minus your rehab costs, minus your expenses like realtor fees, minus the margin, so let's say 80,000, and now you have the price in which you can offer. Now you have that ceiling, and you may start below that ceiling, right? So if you know you have to purchase this property for $150,000 or less, maybe you start at 110, but now you have a price that at least you know you can't go above, and now you can start putting in offers. Now, rent is very similar and actually is less complicated typically than flips because you usually have a little bit less of a rehab involved. And you don't have to worry about a retail consumer on the purchase side, but it's going to be the same thing, okay? Instead of ARV, you do want to know the ARV for a rental because the investor is probably going to exit that property at some point in the future, but what you want to focus on more is the rent. right? We're trying to figure out cash flow for the investor. So again, you're looking at a property for a rental for a client. First thing is, what will this property rent for? And there may be a price that it'll rent for in the current condition and a price that it'll rent for once you do some improvements. And you're going to want to know both. Again, use Rentometer, use the lease comps in the MLS. Now, when you're analyzing a rental, you need to know the monthly expenses. This is the most important part, but it's easier than figuring out rehab costs. So what do I mean by monthly expenses? If they're not paying cash, they're going to have mortgage, taxes, and insurance, right? Your pity payments. So you need to know what that is. That's very easy to calculate based on what the purchase price is going to be. I use Zillow Mortgage Calculator for a lot of this stuff. But outside of the mortgage, insurance, and taxes, you need to know things like who is paying the utilities. If it's the landlord, you have to factor that into the monthly costs. Okay, so you want to factor in utilities. You also probably want to factor in some vacancy. It's very unlikely that the property will be occupied 100% of the time. When you're underwriting a deal, again, you want to factor all of this stuff in. So your area probably has a typical vacancy rate. I'm in Atlanta, it's very low. I usually put 5% for this. And this is just a cushion so that if you have to let go of a tenant or if they leave and you don't receive income for a month, that's factored into the deal already. It could get pretty dangerous factoring 100% occupancy at all times because that's not realistic. Now, the rental property is probably going to need some repairs over the course of a year. The renter may do a little damage, you may get a burst pipe, so it wouldn't be wise not to set aside any money each month for that type of stuff. Usually you have like monthly repair costs and then what's called CapEx, capital expenditures. These are larger costs that of course happen over the course of owning a home. Things like a roof or a foundation or, a water heater. Any cost that's a little bit bigger than average will be a capital expenditure. And again, you probably want to set aside something like 5 to 10% of your gross monthly income for those expenditures. So, you know the rental price, you know the monthly costs, and now you have the cash flow. This is what it will cash flow each month, and your investor should have a very specific goal in mind, and now you have a much better idea if this is going to be a good deal for you. So, as you can see, real estate investing is not complicated. It is tedious and it requires brutal honesty. So let's talk about the most important formula you need to know about, and then we can actually hop on the computer and analyze a couple deals. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're diving into this world, listening to podcasts, reading books, you might feel a little overwhelmed because you hear terms like individual rate of return or the cap rate. There's all kinds of terms that you can get nerdy with in terms of real estate investing. Really, the one that you need to know, especially as a beginner, is cash on cash return. This is a very simple formula for how much an investor gets on return based on how much they put in, right? It's very similar to the stock market. If you invest $10,000 a year in the stock market, you hope to probably get 7 to 8% return, and that translates to any investment. So for real estate, it's a very simple equation. You have the annual cash flow or profit divided by your cash outlay, your expenditure. So the cash on cash return equation is very simple. Now, the numbers you put in for this equation are going to be a little bit different depending on if they purchase all in cash or if they take out a loan, but don't let that confuse you. At the end of the day, even if they take out a loan, there's a certain down payment they put out. So that down payment plus, whatever they put out for repairs is going to be their cash outlay. And so if you have a rental property that is cash flowing, let's say $100 a month, that's $1,200 a year, you're going to divide that by whatever the down payment was for that home. So I know this is hard to visualize with me just talking, so let's hop on the computer and actually analyze a deal using the Bigger Pockets calculators. Now, I've mentioned Bigger Pockets before. I don't remember how much the membership is, but it's definitely worth it. If you're really serious about working with investors, you should get the premium membership on Bigger Pockets because they have calculators to analyze investment deals for rentals, for flips, for BRRRR properties, for whatever you want to do. So let's go take a look. And under tools, there are the calculators. So let's just look real quick at a rental property calculator. I can view my reports or start a new report. We'll start a new one here. And you're just going to put in the address, 123 Banana Street in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll call it 30315. And now you're going to go to your purchase price. So again, The purchase price is probably the price that you'll arrive at last based on the other factors we mentioned, but we're just going to do an example here. And usually what I start with is whatever it's listed for in the MLS or whatever the person who's selling it is asking for. So let's say they're asking for $250,000. Now, the great thing about these calculators is it really helps you to not miss anything. A lot of people forget things like closing costs, right? If you're an investor looking for a deal, you can't forget about this stuff. This is part of your cash outlay. So we'll just say that your closing costs are going to be $3,500. It could be different depending on your area. Now, this does have an option for rehabbing this property. You can put in the after repair value and the rehab costs, and that's going to give you a more in-depth report. We're going to keep it simple right now. We're just going to say you're purchasing as is. Well, in many cases with a rental, you will be purchasing something that already has tenants in it, and it'll probably be rental grade, so you may not have to do really any rehab. So next we're going to look at the loan details. And again, if they're purchasing in cash, that's great. You're going to do cash purchase. Or if they're financing a loan, you're going to put it in here. It's an investment property. It's probably going to be 20% or above. You can put an interest rate. It's around 6% right now. And then you want to put in the loan term. All right, now we're going to look at income. How much income? What is the monthly rent? Let's just say it's $2,500 a month. And again, that's just based on the rental comps, or maybe it's already being rented and you can ask the listing agent how much it's being rented for. The expenses, this is the bread and butter. Okay, this is what you need to pay attention to and really get right, because if you mess this up, the whole deal is going to be off. The property taxes are very easy to pull from the MLS. It usually tells you in the public records exactly how much the property taxes were the previous year. So we'll just say the property taxes are $2,000 a year. I don't know about you, but in most states you can get insurance for about $100 a month. That's what I put. But this is going to be very dependent on your area. So the work you need to put in is figuring out what is appropriate in your area. These are the percentages I was referring to before. Repairs and maintenance, that's just like common piddly stuff that's going to happen every month. A little bit of damage here. Vacancy, again, it's not going to be occupied 100% of the time. CapEx, the property is going to need a new roof at some point, so you're going to want to prepare for that. And then management fees, you want to make sure you know if your investor is going to hire a property manager or not. Usually they cost between 8 to 12% of the gross monthly income. If they're going to manage it themselves, you want to make sure that they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. And if they're using a property management company, you want to know what that rate is. I see 8% a lot, so we'll put that in. Okay, utilities, again, many times the tenant does pay for utilities, but a lot of times maybe the landlord pays for water but not electricity and gas. So we'll leave these two blank and we'll say they pay $75 a month for water. Sewer, at least where I'm from, that's rolled into taxes. So that was already factored in when we put in the taxes. HOA fees is going to be less common because a lot of HOAs don't allow rentals. Garbage, I don't know where you are. For us, garbage is again rolled into taxes, so I usually leave this blank. If there's other random expenses, that could be a million different things. You're going to want to put that in there. And that's really all there is to it. And it's going to create you this really fancy report. And this is why I say Bigger Pockets Premium is worth the money, because this makes you look like a professional. They even let you brand it with your logo if you want, but it creates this whole analysis, not just, immediately, but over 30 years. So you can see this is how much it's going to cash flow based on this income and these expenses, and you can see it's calculated your cash on cash return for you. You can also look at the 5-year annualized return. It'll tell you the mortgage payment, and it gives you a lot of good information. Some of it you don't really need. It's all very simple. It can look like it's complicated, but it's not. And you can edit this stuff. Usually what it looks like for me to analyze a deal is for me to play around with these numbers and to really understand what it's going to take to have it be a good deal. So yeah, so you can see your entire expense breakdown, net operating income, cash on cash return, your pro forma cap rate. Investors may ask you about that, and you can give it to them. 50% rule, that's just dividing everything to make sure there's a lot of cushion there. But what's really cool is you can see over time how the property will perform, and you can even kind of figure out when the best time to potentially exit it is. All right, so that's a rental. I mean, fix and flip is not going to be that different, honestly. There's not too many factors involved here. I'll run through it super quick because I don't want this video to get too long. 123 Banana Street, Atlanta, Georgia, 30315. Okay, the after repair value, again, you're going to comp it out to figure out this is a flip, right? So you want to know what it's going to be able to sell for. So let's say you're going to flip this property and it's going to sell for $450,000 based on, your expertise. Desired profit, we already talked about that, right? Someone doing a deal like this is going to want to make at least $80,000 just to give themselves some cushion, and I wouldn't be surprised if the investors you work with say they want more. Purchase closing cost, this property might be a little bit more expensive. We'll say $4,500. It's going to depend on your area. Again, here it is, rehab costs, right? Repair costs. This is the big variable. This is what you're going to get from the GC that you developed a relationship with, or it's what you're going to get from the spreadsheet that you used after you walked through the property. I can tell you, you want to sell it for $450,000, you want an $80,000 profit. Hard to believe the repairs are going to be less than $115,000 or $100,000. I'll put $115,000 in there. That's a common figure I see, at least in my market. We're talking really broad strokes. Okay, holding costs, right? When you flip a property, you don't sell it right away. You have to pay the mortgage probably for at least 3 months, probably longer than that when you as you try to get it ready to eventually sell. So, based on the amount that you put down, you're going to have a monthly mortgage. I'm really winging it here. It's probably nowhere near right, but this is just an example. But you're going to have some kind of holding costs based on the amount of your loan. And then, this is going to tell you how long, your investor client needs to be able to tell you, and the GC will tell you how quickly they can renovate it. We'll go 3 months. That's 6 to 8 weeks. So that's pretty generous. Agent commission, we'll say 6%. Sales closing costs, I'll put 0. I don't know about you. In my market, the buyer right now is usually paying those costs. So I wouldn't worry about having to pay too many of those, although you might depending on what market you're in. So here you have it. The beautiful thing about this is now you know your maximum allowable offers. So if you found this property in MLS and it's on sale for $299, well, listen, you got to get down to $217.5 to make this a good deal, right? So that is a beautiful part of these tools. It really takes the guesswork out for you. And again, this is just it really breaks down just everything you already put in there. This is a more simple report than the rental one, but that is going to be the maximum allowable offer you have if you want to make an $80,000 profit based on the rehab costs of $115,000 plus your holding costs, okay? And your commissions and the sales costs and all that good stuff. So that is the Bigger Pockets calculators. I highly recommend them. All right, so there you have it. We analyzed 2 deals. I highly recommend you get the Bigger Pockets Premium to use their calculators, get a Rentometer membership, buy Jay Scott's The Book on Estimating Rehab Costs. Those are major tools that you need if you want to attract and work with more investor clients. And if you want to be a real estate investor yourself, they are all very necessary. So I hope that provided you some value and got you excited about this. The good news is, again, it's not complicated. We're not doing calculus here. We're not doing physics, nothing crazy, but it's not complicated. We're not doing calculus here, okay? This is very simple numbers. You just have to be meticulous with recording exactly what the situation is, and you need to be honest. Don't fudge the numbers. You'll build a terrible reputation or you'll lose money yourself. So that is how to analyze an investment property. Once you've developed this skill, you are literally putting yourself head and shoulders above most of the other agents in your market. So this is well worth your time. Really hope you enjoyed that. Please check out my old videos. There's a lot of value in there. Okay, there's a lot of information about working with investors and about how to find off-market properties. Thanks so much for watching. Please reach out to me, give me a call. I would love to work with you. And until my next video, I'll see you next time.